The night was supposed to be normal, just another Thursday with my boyfriend, or so I thought. But as I sat in my car, 2 blocks away from the bar where he often went with his coworkers, my heart was pounding in my chest. I had no idea what to expect. The feeling was suffocating, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to be right or wrong. 6 weeks ago, everything had been fine. He was the guy I imagined spending my life with. We had talked about moving in together, getting engaged. But lately, things felt off. Small things, nothing major, but enough to make me doubt everything I thought I knew. His behavior, touching his phone more than usual, staying late for work, avoiding plans, was a shift I couldn't ignore. And when I asked, he got defensive, accusing me of being paranoid. I wasn't the only one who noticed. My best friend since college, the one who always had my back, offered to help me find the truth. She was gorgeous, confident, and had zero interest in my boyfriend, perfect for what I had in mind. We came up with a simple plan. She'd go to the bar where he always hung out, start a conversation with him, and I'd listen in through her phone. As I sat there, waiting for her to make her move, the unease twisted inside me. What was I hoping for? That everything would be fine, or that the truth would set me free? The first 20 minutes were normal, just casual bar talk. Then I heard her laugh, followed by a smooth, "So, do you come here often?" And just like that, the conversation took a turn. He was complimenting her eyes, her smile, asking about her interests. He even told her she was different, that he didn't usually do this. My stomach dropped. He'd been talking to another woman, just like I feared, but it wasn't just the conversation that stung. It was the way he said, "We're basically roommates at this point," about our 3-year relationship. I couldn't believe it. The man I thought I knew had been talking about me like that. My heart sank, but I kept listening. When the conversation ended, I knew what I had to do. I met him when I least expected it, at a friend's gathering, a casual evening with no grand expectations. He was charming, easy to talk to, and the attraction was instant. We clicked, quickly becoming a couple that people could easily see was a match. We both came from similar backgrounds, had similar values, and both dreamed of a future together. At first, everything was perfect. We spent weekends together, talking about our plans for the future. I never questioned his loyalty, because we shared everything. There was no secret he kept from me. At least I thought there wasn't. We talked about moving in together, getting engaged next year, even about children. We were so sure of our relationship, or so I thought. The first year was full of laughter, the kind that makes you think you found your person. We took trips together, even small ones, but every time I saw him, I could feel his warmth and his attention to me. He was all I needed. He would surprise me with thoughtful gestures, a dinner when I was stressed, a gift just because. I loved how he made me feel safe. But then, after about a year and a half, I began to notice a change. It started small, almost unnoticeable. He began to spend more time at work, more time away from home. His phone always seemed to be a little too close to him, and when he did answer it, his tone would change. It was subtle, but it was there. I tried to brush it off at first. Just stress from work, I thought. But the changes began to pile up, one on top of the other. He wasn't as affectionate as before, not as present. One evening, when I had asked him about his phone, he was being secretive about it again. He snapped at me, accusing me of being paranoid. That was the moment everything shifted. It wasn't just about his phone anymore. It was about me feeling like something was being hidden from me. I started to pull away emotionally. There were so many questions I couldn't answer, and it was like the distance between us was growing. And yet he continued to reassure me that everything was fine. But the words didn't match the actions. Still, I held on to the hope that we could work through it. We had made so many plans. There was so much invested. Then came the night I couldn't ignore anymore. He came home late, and I could see it in his eyes. Something was off. But when I asked him about it, he laughed it off. I went to bed that night with a knot in my stomach, uncertain, but still unsure of what to do. I could feel the walls of my world starting to crumble, but I refused to acknowledge it. My best friend saw what was happening. She saw the confusion in my eyes, the stress that had begun to show. She offered to help me find out the truth, to finally give me the clarity I needed. And so, the plan was born. She would go to the bar, a place he frequented, and I would listen in. She had no idea what was coming, but I was terrified of what I might hear. The nagging doubts about my boyfriend's behavior didn't come all at once. They started as tiny, almost imperceptible shifts in our relationship. At first, I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe I was just stressed. Maybe I was projecting my insecurities onto him. But then the signs became too frequent to ignore. His defensiveness when I asked about his phone, the late nights at work, and the sudden coldness that replaced the affection we once shared. One night, I stood by the window, watching the cars pass by outside as I waited for him to come home. I told myself everything would be fine, that I was just being paranoid. But when he walked in, there was something off about him. His eyes didn't meet mine the way they used to. His smile felt forced. It was like we were two strangers living in the same house. That's when my best friend suggested we get to the bottom of it. She could see it too. How much I had been changing, how much I was pulling away from everything, trying to understand what was wrong. She wasn't just my friend. She was like a sister. And I knew she could help me figure out what was going on. We didn't know what we were getting into. She didn't know him the way I did. She didn't know the way he smiled when he was being genuine, or how his voice would soften when he spoke to me. I tried to rationalize it all, thinking, maybe I'm just being dramatic, maybe nothing's wrong. But deep down, I knew something was slipping away from me, from us. We made a plan. She would meet him at the bar where he always went with his coworkers on Thursday nights. A simple test. She'd talk to him, nothing more. I'd listen in from the safety of my car, 2 blocks away. My hands were shaking as I typed out the plan, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea what I was hoping for. Part of me wanted to be wrong, part of me didn't. But all I could think of was the knot in my stomach, the feeling that I couldn't ignore anymore. The first part of the evening was just like I expected. Friendly banter, easy going. But then something shifted. I heard the laugh in his voice that used to make me smile. He was charming, flirting even. My stomach dropped as I listened. I had always known when he was being genuine, and now? Now I didn't recognize him. He complimented her eyes, her smile. He was leaning in, asking her questions about her life. It felt like a betrayal in real time. But what hit the hardest was when he said, "We're basically roommates at this point." I felt like the ground beneath me was crumbling. This wasn't just him being friendly. This was him talking about me as though I didn't exist. Like I was just another person in the background of his life. I could barely breathe. I texted my best friend to end the conversation, and I sat in my car, frozen in place. When I went home, I did what I had to do. I played the recording the next morning. My heart was racing, but I had to confront him. I had to know if he was going to lie to my face one more time. When I asked him, "Want to explain what happened last night?" he barely looked up from his phone. His first words were, "Nothing happened." I pulled out my phone, hit play, and watched his face drain of color as the recording played. "This doesn't sound like nothing," I said. I let it play through the compliments, the flirtation, and his offhand comment about us being roommates. His face went white, and he stood up, his voice shaking with anger. "You set me up," he said, but his words didn't land. I couldn't hear him anymore. His excuses felt like an insult. I didn't back down. "And you fell for it," I replied, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. The words that came out of his mouth next, the ones where he tried to justify his actions by blaming me, shattered something inside me. "If you weren't so insecure and controlling, I wouldn't have needed to look elsewhere," he said. His attempt to flip the blame onto me was the last straw. I laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was pure disbelief. And then I told him to leave. I stood my ground, despite the guilt trying to crawl up my throat. I wasn't the crazy one. He was the one who had betrayed us, betrayed me. The moment I told him to leave, something inside me shifted. I had no idea what was about to unfold, but it was like I had stepped out of a fog. The reality of his betrayal was sinking in, and I felt this surge of clarity. He wasn't just someone I loved. He was someone who had lied to me, manipulated me, and tried to turn everything around to make me feel like I was the problem. That was the moment I knew everything had changed. At first, he refused to leave. He stood there, trying to act tough, like his ego had been bruised, but I could see the panic creeping in behind his eyes. "You can't just kick me out," he said, voice shaking, but he was already packing his bag. The arrogance had melted away, replaced by desperation. He didn't know how to handle being confronted. And in that moment, I felt a flicker of power, something I hadn't realized I'd lost until now. I had control. "I'm not the one who made this mess," I told him, my voice low but firm. He kept muttering about how unfair I was being, how he didn't deserve this. I didn't let it faze me. His words didn't matter anymore. I was done listening to his lies, done waiting for an apology that would never come. He tried to plead with me, of course. He said I was overreacting, that we could work things out, but his words sounded hollow. "You know I love you," he said, but there was no conviction in his voice. I didn't believe him anymore. His love wasn't real. It was a manipulation, something to keep me hooked while he looked for someone else. I told him to leave, and I wasn't going to back down. I called my brother to come over, not out of fear, but out of necessity. I needed someone to be there, to make sure he actually left. The whole situation felt surreal, like something out of a movie, but I was grounded. I knew I couldn't let him stay. I couldn't let him gaslight me into thinking I was the crazy one. Within 15 minutes, my brother arrived. When he saw what was happening, he didn't ask questions. He just stood there, arms crossed, a silent show of support. I could see my ex's face change from angry defiance to nervous uncertainty. He didn't want to deal with my brother, and honestly, he knew he was caught. He didn't stand a chance against the weight of the truth. At that point, the man who had once been my partner, my best friend, my future, was nothing but a stranger. He packed his things quickly, practically running out the door. As he left, he tried one last attempt to make me feel guilty. "You'll regret this," he spat, his words full of venom. "No one's going to want someone as paranoid and manipulative as you." I didn't let his words affect me. I didn't feel regret. I felt relief. This was the first step in taking my life back, in taking control of my future. I wasn't going to let him drag me down anymore. He could say whatever he wanted, but I was done. I changed the locks that afternoon. It cost me $200, but it was the best investment I had ever made. I wasn't going to let him just walk back into my life whenever he felt like it. That was the moment I decided I was done living in fear, done questioning myself, and done sacrificing my happiness for someone who didn't value me. The next few days were a blur. My phone blew up with messages from him, texts, calls, voicemails. He tried to apologize, tried to convince me I overreacted, tried to make me believe that it was all just a misunderstanding. But it was too late. I had already seen who he truly was, and I wasn't going to let him back into my life. Not now, not ever. But it didn't stop there. His mother, of course, called me too. The messages I received from her were full of accusations. She said I humiliated her son, that I was crazy for testing him. She called me abusive for trapping him in a loyalty test. Her words were cruel, but they didn't reach me. I had made my decision, and nothing she could say would change that. At that point, I realized how deeply ingrained his manipulation had been. It wasn't just about him cheating. It was about everything he had done to make me feel crazy, to make me doubt myself. And now, here they were, his family, his friends, trying to turn me into the villain for doing the one thing that gave me clarity, the audacity. As much as his mother's call bothered me, I refused to let it sway me. I wasn't the villain here. He was. And no matter how much he or anyone else tried to make me feel guilty, I knew the truth. I wasn't crazy. I was just someone who had been betrayed, and I wasn't going to let it define me. The hours after he left felt like a blur, but I could feel my heart still pounding in my chest, like it was trying to break free. The adrenaline was wearing off, and what was left was a hollow, quiet kind of pain. He was gone, but I couldn't escape the feeling of betrayal that had seeped into my bones. He wasn't just a stranger now. He was a man I had trusted, a man I had thought would be there forever. But as much as it hurt, a part of me was relieved. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I wasn't pretending anymore. The lies, the deceit, the guilt, all of it was suddenly out in the open, no longer festering inside me. Still, the uncertainty lingered. Was I too harsh? Was kicking him out too much too soon? He had been my whole world for 3 years. How could I just turn that off? A wave of guilt washed over me as I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the spot where he used to sleep. What if I was overreacting? What if the whole thing was a misunderstanding, a result of my insecurities? I didn't want to be the crazy one. I didn't want to be the villain in this story. But then I thought about the recording. His voice, so casual, telling another woman that we were basically roommates after 3 years together. That was the moment it hit me again. He had already checked out of this relationship long before I found out. He had made a choice, and it wasn't me. I didn't realize it then, but that was when the shift really happened. The pieces clicked into place. This wasn't about me being paranoid. This was about me listening to my gut, the gut that had been telling me something wasn't right for weeks. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the one who had broken the trust. He was. He had made me feel like I was the one at fault. But the truth was, he had been lying to me. He had been living in a fantasy, and I had just been part of the act. The guilt started to fade as I allowed myself to sit with that truth. Yes, it hurt. Yes, I still loved him. But that love had been built on a foundation of lies. I couldn't ignore that anymore. I had to remind myself that I deserved more than this. More than the gaslighting, the manipulation, and the silence when I needed him the most. The text messages and voicemails started almost immediately. His first message was full of pleading, apologies, promises that things could change. He said he was sorry, that he didn't mean what he said, that he had been under stress and had made a mistake. But the words felt empty. They were just more of the same excuses that had kept me hooked for so long. Then came the angrier ones. He called me paranoid. He said I overreacted. He said I was being controlling and crazy, trying to manipulate him into thinking I was the victim. It was all so familiar, the same old tricks. I had heard it all before. But this time, I wasn't buying it. I had already heard the truth in that recording. I had already seen his true colors. And I wasn't about to let him twist it all back on me. The worst part was his mother. The phone call came a few hours later, her voice sharp with accusation. She told me I had humiliated her son. She said I had no right to test his loyalty, that I had no business trying to trap him into a situation where he couldn't make mistakes. Her words felt like knives in my chest, but I kept my composure. I reminded myself that this wasn't about her. This was about me. I hung up before she could say anything else, but her words stuck with me. She wasn't the first person to say I was wrong for setting boundaries. His friends, his family, they all sided with him. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't know what he had said, what he had done. They couldn't understand the devastation of realizing that the man I loved had been planning to leave me for someone else. I couldn't let them control the narrative. The more I thought about it, the more it became clear. His actions, his words, were the true betrayal. Not my decision to stand up for myself, not my decision to demand the truth. The anger that had started to simmer beneath the surface began to burn hotter. It was anger for the way he had treated me, for the way his family and friends were siding with him, and for the way I had been made to feel like I was the crazy one. But beneath that anger, there was also a quiet, building sense of empowerment. I wasn't alone. I had my friends, my family, people who cared about me and could see the truth. I had my own strength, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of hope. I was going to be okay. I would rebuild my life. I would take the time to heal, to focus on myself, and to make sure I never let anyone make me feel small again. I thought the worst part was over once he left my apartment and the locks were changed. I was wrong. What came after was slower, uglier, and far more exhausting. It started with my phone. At first, it was just messages, a few texts an hour, then dozens. He didn't apologize, not really. Instead, every message carried the same undertone. You overreacted. We need to talk. You're blowing this out of proportion. I didn't respond. I muted the notifications, turned my phone face down on the table, and tried to breathe through the constant buzzing. But even in silence, I could feel the pressure of his presence. He wasn't gone. He was just attacking from a distance. By the second day, the tone changed. The messages turned sharp, accusatory. He accused me of psychological abuse, of manipulation, of setting him up like a criminal. He told me I had violated his trust. The irony would have been funny if it hadn't been so infuriating. He tried to cheat, lied about it, and somehow I was the villain for exposing the truth. Then, just when I thought he'd reached peak audacity, the messages softened again. I miss you. I still love you. We can fix this. I didn't reply to any of it. I took screenshots instead. Every message, every missed call. I started a folder on my phone and labeled it simply, Evidence. On the third day, his mother called again, 3 times in one afternoon. Against my better judgment, I answered the third call. You need to apologize to my son, she said without greeting me. Her voice was sharp, rehearsed. You humiliated him. I felt my jaw tighten. I'm sorry, what? He made a tiny mistake, she continued, and you completely overreacted. Boys will be boys. You can't expect perfection. My hands started shaking, but I kept my voice steady. He tried to cheat on me. He didn't actually cheat, she snapped. He just talked to someone. You're punishing him for something he didn't even do. The mental gymnastics were Olympic level. I realized then that this wasn't about truth. It was about protecting him at all costs, even if that meant rewriting reality. I told her to lose my number and hung up. That should have been the end of it. It wasn't. His friends started messaging me next, one after another, like a coordinated effort. His best friend from high school sent a long paragraph about how loyalty tests are toxic and how I had violated his trust by spying on him. Another friend warned me I was going to ruin his reputation over nothing. Someone else told me I should think about how this would affect his future relationships. I stared at my phone in disbelief. Not one of them asked what he had said. Not one of them asked to hear the recording. They had already chosen a side. I replied to one message, just one. His behavior will ruin his reputation. I'm just being honest about what happened. Then I blocked them. That's when things got petty. One morning I woke up to emails saying my Netflix, Hulu, and Spotify passwords had been changed. Accounts I paid for, accounts I had shared with him while we were together. It wasn't devastating. It was worse. It was vindictive. I recovered the accounts within an hour, changed every password, logged out all devices, but the message was clear. If he couldn't control me emotionally, he'd try to inconvenience me instead. Later that day, I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. You really think you're better than him? You're a manipulative witch who can't keep a man. He dodged a bullet. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. I already knew who it was, or at least who it was connected to. What hurt more than the harassment was the social fallout. I ran into his cousin at Target a few days later. We'd been friendly during the relationship. Coffee dates, casual chats. When she saw me, she made eye contact, then turned her cart around and walked the other way. My stomach dropped. That's when it really hit me. He had been telling everyone his version of the story. In his version, I wasn't a woman who trusted her gut. I was an unstable manipulator who psychologically tortured him with mind games. Even my best friend, the one who helped me, started getting nasty messages. People called her a homewrecker, accused her of destroying a relationship. None of it made sense, but logic wasn't the goal. Control was. Then came his message that finally broke something in me. I'm willing to forgive you, he wrote, if you admit what you did was wrong. We can go to couples therapy and work on your trust issues. I still love you despite everything. I stared at my phone, my pulse pounding in my ears. He was willing to forgive me. That was the moment exhaustion fully set in. Not sadness, not confusion, just bone-deep fatigue. I replied with 3 words, lose this number. Then I blocked him again. I sat on my couch afterward, phone in my lap, staring at the wall. My apartment felt quiet, but not peaceful yet. It was the kind of quiet that comes before a storm finishes passing through. My friends and family were firmly on my side. My mom was ready to drive to his workplace and confront him herself until I talked her down. Their support helped, but it didn't erase the emotional drain of being painted as the villain for simply refusing to tolerate betrayal. Still, something unexpected happened beneath all the chaos. I started sleeping better. No more waking up at 3 a.m., wondering why he was distant. No more anxiety over his phone lighting up. No more questioning my instincts. There was anger, yes, but there was also clarity. For the first time in months, I wasn't doubting myself, and that scared him. I thought I had reached the bottom already. I was wrong. The silence after I blocked him didn't feel like peace at first. It felt like standing in the aftermath of a storm, unsure whether it was actually over or just pausing to gather strength. I kept my phone close, half expecting it to light up again. And it did. Just not the way I expected. He found new ways. Burner numbers, private accounts, indirect attacks. Every time I blocked one, another appeared. Sometimes it was rage. Sometimes it was pity. Sometimes it was twisted affection, dripping with entitlement. Each message carried the same core message. You don't get to end this on your terms. What unsettled me most wasn't the volume, it was the persistence, the refusal to accept reality. The way he acted like access to me was something he was owed. Then came the moment that shifted fear from abstract to physical. I was at work when my boss called me into her office. She looked confused, not angry, concerned. Your ex-boyfriend called, she said carefully. He told me you were going through a mental health crisis and might need time off. My stomach dropped. I explained everything. The test, the recording, the breakup, the harassment. Her expression hardened as I spoke. She told me to document everything and said plainly, if he contacts this office again, let me know immediately. I walked back to my desk feeling exposed, violated, like he had reached into the one place that was supposed to be neutral and safe. That same day, my neighbor texted me, "Hey, this is going to sound weird, but there's a guy sitting in a car outside the building. He's been there for a while." She sent a photo. It was him. He sat there for nearly 2 hours, watching the entrance like he was waiting for something or someone. I wasn't home, thank God, but my hands were shaking so badly I had to sit down. I filed a police report. The officer was polite but dismissive. "Unless he threatens you or trespasses, there's not much we can do," he said. "He's in a public space." Public space. Private terror. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside my window felt amplified. Every car door made my heart race. I realized then how quickly emotional harassment turns into something else entirely. As if that wasn't enough, he escalated again. He created a burner Instagram account and posted about our breakup. He didn't name me, but anyone who knew us knew exactly who he was talking about. A long, dramatic post about betrayal, about manipulation, about being set up. The comments were worse. "She sounds crazy. You dodged a bullet, bro. Loyalty tests are emotional abuse." I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I let him scream into the void. But reading those words, seeing strangers dissect my character based on his lies, cut deeper than I expected. Then came the Venmo requests. $150. Birthday dinner. $200. Concert tickets. $120. Groceries. $380. Dates and gifts. The memo read, "Half of what I spent on you the last 3 months." I stared at the screen in disbelief. We had always split things evenly. Some of those expenses were his idea, his favorite band, meals at his place, and yet here he was, reframing generosity as debt. I declined every request without comment. Within an hour, another text came through from a new number. "So now you're stealing from me too? Add theft to manipulation." That was it. That was the moment the exhaustion turned into resolve. I wasn't just tired, I was done being reactive, done playing defense, done letting him dictate the rhythm of my life. I called a lawyer friend, not to sue, not to escalate publicly, but to protect myself. She listened quietly, then said, "You can send a cease and desist." Formal, documented, clear. I paid $300 to have it drafted and sent via certified mail to his address and his parents' house. But even after that, my hands shook when I put my phone down. Not because I doubted the decision, but because it had come to this at all. Because the man I had loved had turned into someone I needed legal protection from. That night, I sat alone in my apartment, lights dim, furniture unfamiliar now that he was gone. I hugged my knees to my chest and let myself feel it fully. The grief, the anger, the betrayal. Not just of his actions, but of the future I thought we were building. This was the darkest point. Not because I missed him, but because I finally understood how little he respected me, how easily he could rewrite reality if it benefited him, and how necessary it was that I never let him back in. It took a while, but I reached the point where I was done being afraid, done questioning myself, done letting my ex's voice echo in my mind, trying to rewrite my story. When I got the cease and desist letter in the mail, I didn't feel relief. I felt empowerment. Finally, I had taken back control over this situation that had spiraled out of control. He was no longer allowed to invade my life, emotionally or physically. But of course, he didn't stop. One morning, about a week after I sent the letter, I walked into my gym as usual. I had been going there for months, just focusing on myself, pushing my body through the motions, letting it be a form of therapy. That day, I was looking forward to just getting through my workout, clearing my head, and then I saw him. I didn't even need to see his face. I recognized him immediately, sitting on a treadmill, staring straight ahead. It was like my whole body froze. I could feel my heart stop, my breath catch in my throat. He didn't look at me. He just kept walking on the treadmill as if he didn't care. But I knew what he was doing. He wasn't here for a workout. He was here for a confrontation. I stood there for a second, trying to steady my breath. I had every right to ignore him, to walk away, to keep moving forward without him in my life. But something shifted in that moment. My anger, my hurt, it all crystallized into something sharper. I wasn't going to let him have any part of me anymore, not even in the form of his constant attempts to regain control. I walked over to the front desk, my feet heavy with the realization that this had gone on long enough. "I need help," I said to the staff member on duty, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's someone in here who's harassing me. Please, I need you to do something." I watched as the gym staff member, a man I'd seen around but never spoken to before, walked over to my ex. He wasn't large or imposing, but his voice was firm, and there was no hesitation when he spoke. "Sir, you need to leave. This lady doesn't want to talk to you. You need to go." My ex's eyes widened in disbelief. He tried to argue, trying to insist that this was a private matter between us, but the staff member wasn't backing down. "No, you need to leave now, or I'm calling security." I stood still, watching it unfold, my stomach in knots. But the longer I stood there, the more something inside me clicked. I was done. Done feeling afraid. Done wondering if I was making the right choice. This was my space, my sanctuary. He had no right to violate that anymore. He huffed, his face reddening in frustration, but in the end, he didn't push it. He grabbed his bag and stormed out of the gym, yelling over his shoulder, "You'll regret this. You're going to regret all of it." I didn't flinch. The words hit me, but they didn't stick. I felt a strange calm take over. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I wasn't afraid of his threats or his attempts to manipulate me. I had finally taken the steps I needed to take, and now I was stronger because of it. I went back to my workout, but it wasn't just physical exercise anymore. It was mental too. It was me reclaiming my space, reclaiming my body, reclaiming my life. Later that evening, I received a text from him. Of course. His message was short, but it was filled with venom. "You're a coward. You couldn't even face me like an adult. You've made a huge mistake." I almost laughed. I didn't respond, but I felt this surge of clarity flood my mind. The game was over. He could send messages, he could post whatever he wanted, but I wasn't going to be part of his narrative anymore. The next day, I made the call to my lawyer. I wasn't playing anymore. The legal steps had to be taken. I needed to protect myself fully, and that meant taking the next steps and getting a restraining order, if necessary. I needed the full support of the law to back up my boundaries. And this time, I wasn't asking for permission. I wasn't tiptoeing around the consequences. I was doing this for me, for my peace of mind, for my future. The ex would no longer have the ability to drag me into his chaos. I wasn't his victim. I was a woman who had been lied to, hurt, and betrayed. But I was no longer that woman. I had changed. I had fought for my life back. I didn't need to tell him that. He already knew. His calls, his messages, his attempts to contact me, they all showed the same thing. He couldn't accept losing control. But I was done. The gym incident changed everything. This time, when I filed a police report, they didn't brush it off. There was a witness. There was documented history. There was a cease and desist already on record. The officer took notes carefully, asked detailed questions, and told me they would go to his apartment and issue a formal warning, one step away from a restraining order. For the first time since all of this began, I felt like someone was taking me seriously. That evening, my phone rang from an unknown number. Against my instincts, I answered. It was his father. I'd met him twice in 3 years. Quiet, reserved, not particularly close to his son. His voice was calm, measured. "I heard what's been happening," he said. "My son's behavior is unacceptable." I didn't say anything at first. I just listened. "He showed up at your gym. He contacted your workplace. That's not okay," he continued. "I told him to leave you alone." Something inside me loosened, just a little. Then he said something that stuck with me. "His mother enables him, always has." It wasn't an excuse. It wasn't a defense. It was simply an explanation and an acknowledgement that what I'd been dealing with wasn't imagined. He apologized, not on his son's behalf, but for what I'd been put through. I thanked him and hung up, my hands shaking, not from fear this time, but from the emotional whiplash of finally being believed by someone on his side. 2 days later, everything finally made sense. I got a message on Facebook from a woman I didn't know. "Hi," she wrote carefully. "This is random, but are you my name? I think we might have dated the same guy." My stomach dropped. We talked on the phone that night. Her voice was hesitant at first, then increasingly horrified as we compared timelines. Dinners, he said, were for work. Nights, he claimed he was exhausted. Times, he said our relationship was basically over. He'd been seeing her during the last month of our relationship. Not the woman at the bar. Another woman entirely. She told me he'd painted me as unstable, jealous, controlling, that our relationship was basically done. Sound familiar? She sent screenshots, messages where he complained about me, where he minimized our relationship, where he lied effortlessly. The loyalty test hadn't just caught him trying to cheat. It caught him actively cheating. Finding out hurt more than I expected, worse than the attempted betrayal. But it also snapped the last lingering thread of doubt inside me. I wasn't paranoid, I wasn't manipulative, I wasn't wrong. I sent him one final message from a free texting app. I know about her. I know you were cheating the last month. Don't contact me again, ever. Then I blocked the number. He tried to call 16 times in the next 3 hours. Different numbers. Same desperation. I didn't answer a single one. His best friend reached out a day later with an apology. Apparently the truth had finally come out. My ex had admitted everything. The cheating, the lies, the manipulation. His friends were done covering for him. Even his mother backed off after his father confronted her with the facts. The Instagram post disappeared. The Venmo requests were withdrawn. The noise stopped. It's been quiet for a week now. I'm cautiously optimistic, but I'm not naive anymore. I started therapy. Not because I thought I did something wrong, but because betrayal like this leaves bruises you can't see. My therapist helped me put words to something I hadn't been able to articulate. Trusting your gut isn't manipulation. It's self-preservation. I met the other woman for coffee once. We're not friends, but there was something healing about talking to someone who saw the same mask slip, the same charm, the same lies. I joined a new gym, fresh start. I rearranged my apartment. New artwork, new furniture placement, making it mine again instead of ours. As for him, last I heard, he's still telling people we're both crazy. 2 women conspiring against him. It doesn't matter anymore. The people who matter know the truth. And for the first time since this started, I feel like myself again. It's strange how quiet life becomes after chaos finally leaves. No buzzing phone, no new burner numbers, no accusations waiting in my inbox. Just silence and space to breathe. I'm not healed overnight. That's not how it works. But I'm grounded in a way I wasn't before. I wake up without that familiar knot in my stomach. I don't replay conversations in my head anymore, wondering what I missed, what I misunderstood, what I did wrong. The questions stopped haunting me once the truth fully surfaced. I didn't lose him. I lost the version of him I thought existed. That distinction matters. Therapy has helped me name what happened. Gaslighting, blame shifting, entitlement. Not because I need labels to feel validated, but because understanding patterns keeps me from repeating them. My therapist said something that stuck with me. You didn't test his loyalty, you tested reality. She was right. The loyalty test didn't create betrayal, it revealed it. I rearranged my apartment until it felt unfamiliar, in the best way. New throw pillows, different artwork. I wanted the space to reflect who I am now, not who I was when I was trying to hold a relationship together alone. My best friend still checks in constantly, asks if I'm eating enough, sleeping enough, healing enough. Her presence reminds me that support doesn't come with conditions or guilt. It just shows up. As for him, I don't follow the updates anymore. I don't care what version of the story he's telling now. Whether he paints himself as the victim or claims 2 women conspired against him. Let him rewrite history if that's what he needs to sleep at night. I know the truth. I trusted my instincts when something felt off. I asked questions. I demanded honesty. And when I didn't get it, I protected myself. I would do it again. I'm 28 years old. I have my whole life ahead of me, and I refuse to waste another second on someone who saw me as a roommate instead of a partner. To everyone who listened, who supported me, who shared their own stories, thank you, truly. And if you're reading this wondering whether you're crazy for noticing red flags, for needing clarity, for choosing yourself, hear this. You're not overreacting, you're not manipulative, and trusting your gut is not abuse. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. No regrets, no apologies. I'm done.